The great crystal halls of the Galactic Council shimmered with otherworldly light. Representatives from 47 different alien species sat in perfect circles, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some floated in bubbles of liquid methane, others existed as pure energy, their thoughts projected through quantum translators. The Zephyrians looked like living diamonds, their crystalline bodies refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. At the center of this gathering, a holographic display showed the spiral arm of the galaxy. Red dots marked human settlements spreading like an infection across previously empty space. The dots had tripled in number over the past 50 years. The human problem grows worse, announced Elder HFY, his crystal form chiming like wind through glass. They expand without permission. They ignore our borders. They refuse to follow galactic law. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Benthos delegation, aquatic beings in mechanical suits filled with purple water, clicked their disapproval. Their translator spoke in bubbling tones. Humans are primitive. They have been in space for only 200 years. We have ruled the stars for 10,000. Commander Vextar of the Hegemony Coalition stood at his designated platform. His people looked like tall, muscular humanoids covered in metallic scales that shifted color with their emotions. Right now, those scales showed deep red anger. Primitive or not, they are a threat. My scouts report human ships entering the protected Kepler sector without authorization. They mine asteroids that belong to Council member states. They build colonies on worlds we have marked as restricted. The energy beings known as the Lumina pulsed with soft blue light as their representative spoke. Perhaps we should try peaceful contact again. The humans may simply not understand our ways. Vextar's scales flashed brighter red. We have tried peaceful contact. Their response is always the same. They smile, they nod, they agree to consider our requests. Then they do exactly what they were doing before. A new voice cut through the debate. Perhaps that is because you treat their reasonable responses as defiance. Every eye sensor and consciousness in the chamber turned toward the human section. Dr. Sarah Chen sat alone at a small table, looking impossibly tiny among the massive alien forms around her. She was in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and tired eyes, wearing a simple blue uniform with Earth's symbol on the shoulder. Chen had been humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 3 years. Most species barely noticed her presence. Humans were so new to space travel that many aliens considered them barely above animals. Their technology was crude, their ships were slow, and their weapons were laughably primitive. Dr. Chen, Elder HFY's crystal voice rang with condescension. Perhaps you can explain why your species continues to violate our clearly stated boundaries. Chen stood slowly, her movements careful and measured. Elder HFY, we have received your communications. However, I must point out that humanity never agreed to recognize these boundaries. We were not consulted when they were drawn. We were not invited to participate in the decision-making process. Vextar's scales now showed violent orange. You were not consulted because you are newcomers. These boundaries have existed for millennia, long before your species even discovered fire. That may be true, Chen replied calmly. But we did not sign any treaty agreeing to honor them. In human law, one cannot be bound by agreements one never made. The chamber erupted in angry voices, clicks, hums, and energy pulses. The Benthos representative's translator struggled to keep up with the rapid-fire complaints. Arrogant. Presumptuous. Dangerous! Chen waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. Honored representatives, humanity seeks only to find new homes for our growing population. We are not trying to cause conflict. We simply need room to grow. Then you will grow within the boundaries we set for you, Vextar declared. His scales had shifted to deep purple, which among his people indicated absolute authority. The Hegemony Coalition controls this sector of space. We have defeated every enemy we have ever faced. Our ships can destroy suns. Our shields can stop any weapon. If humanity continues to expand beyond approved limits, we will take corrective action. The threat hung in the air like a physical presence. Other alien representatives nodded their approval or flashed supportive colors. Chen looked around the chamber, seeing the united front against her species. These beings commanded technologies that could reshape reality itself. They had ruled the galaxy since before Earth's continents had formed their current shapes. I understand your position, Chen said finally. I will relay your message to my government. Elder HFY's crystal form brightened with satisfaction. Good. We expect humanity's compliance within 6 months. Cease all expansion beyond current boundaries. Withdraw from the Kepler sector. Submit to Council oversight of future colonization efforts. I said I would relay your message, Chen repeated. I did not say we would comply. The chamber fell silent. Even the energy beings stopped their constant humming. Vextar's scales cycled through several colors before settling on deep black, a shade that meant mortal offense among his people. Dr. Chen, he said, his voice deadly quiet. I do not think you understand the situation. The Hegemony Coalition has never lost a war. We have weapons that can crack planets like eggs. We have ships that can travel faster than light itself. Your entire species exists only because we permit it. Chen smiled, and something in that expression made several nearby aliens unconsciously lean away from her. Commander Vextar, I think you are the one who does not understand the situation. You assume that because our technology appears primitive, we are helpless. You assume that because we are new to space, we are weak. You assume that because we seem peaceful, we cannot fight. She gathered her materials and prepared to leave. You have made your position clear. Now let me make humanity's position equally clear. We will consider your request. As Chen walked toward the exit, Vextar called after her. That is not an answer. Chen paused at the chamber's entrance and turned back. For just a moment, her tired expression was replaced by something else, something that reminded the watching aliens that humans had clawed their way to the top of their planet's food chain, through sheer, bloody determination. Commander, in human diplomacy, everything is a request until it becomes a threat. You have just made the transition from one to the other. I suggest you prepare accordingly. With that, she left the chamber. The assembled representatives sat in stunned silence for several minutes before the debates resumed. Most agreed that the humans were clearly bluffing. What could one primitive species do against the combined might of galactic civilization? Elder Zephai's crystal form pulsed with satisfied light. The humans will see reason. They have no choice. Vextar was not so certain. His scales remained black as he studied the holographic display showing human settlements. Something about Dr. Chen's final words bothered him. Humans were supposed to be emotional, irrational creatures, but Chen had been calm, controlled, almost calculating. 6 months, he thought. In 6 months, they would see what humanity was truly made of. He had no doubt that his forces would prove superior. The hegemony had never failed to crush defiance. But as he left the chamber, Vextar found himself wondering why the humans had seemed so confident in the face of impossible odds. In his experience, only 2 types of beings showed such confidence: those who were insane and those who knew something their enemies did not. For humanity's sake, he hoped they were simply insane. 6 months passed like the turning of cosmic wheels. The Galactic Council waited for humanity's response to their ultimatum. They waited for the humans to back down, to negotiate, to show proper respect for galactic law. Instead, they received reports that made their confidence evaporate like morning mist. Human expansion had not stopped. It had accelerated. Commander Vextar stood in the war room of his flagship, the Dominion's Edge, studying tactical displays that made no sense. Red dots representing human settlements had spread across 12 star systems in the past month alone. Mining operations appeared overnight on asteroids that had been empty space the day before. Massive construction projects were detected in the Outer Rim territories, far beyond any previously known human presence. Show me the Kepler sector again, Vextar ordered his intelligence officer, Sub-Commander Thralex. The holographic display shifted to show the disputed region. Where once there had been only 3 small human outposts, now there were dozens of installations. Orbital platforms surrounded every major asteroid. Energy signatures indicated massive industrial operations. Sir, Thralex reported, his scales showing confused yellow patterns. We detect heavy construction in the outer asteroid belt. Whatever they are building, it is enormous. Our long-range sensors indicate a structure at least 20 kilometers in length. 20 kilometers? Vextar's scales flashed orange with disbelief. That is larger than our battle cruisers. What kind of facility requires such size? Unknown, sir. The humans are using some kind of interference technology. Our sensors cannot penetrate their construction zone. We only know something massive is being built because of its gravitational effects on nearby asteroids. Vextar studied the display for long minutes. Around him, his bridge crew waited silently. The Hegemony Coalition had ruled this sector of space for 3,000 years. They had defeated the crystal armies of Zephyr Prime. They had crushed the biomechanical fleets of the Hive Queens. They had even successfully contained the reality-warping voidwalkers, but the humans were proving to be different. Other species fought according to known patterns. They used standard tactics, recognized boundaries, followed the rules of civilized warfare. Humans seemed to ignore all of these concepts. "Sir," his communications officer announced, "we are receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. Elder HFY requests immediate conference." The hologram of the crystal being materialized in front of Vextar's command chair. Elder HFY's normally perfect surface showed stress fractures indicating extreme agitation. "Commander Vextar, the situation has become intolerable. Human ships were detected entering the sanctuary system yesterday. They are surveying worlds that have been protected for millennia. Some of these planets contain the last remaining specimens of extinct species. This cannot be permitted." Vextar's scales shifted to deep purple, the color of grim determination. "I agree, Elder. The time for warnings has passed. I request authorization to use the Grand Fleet." Authorization granted. "The Council is prepared to support any action necessary to restore order. These humans must learn their place in galactic civilization." After the transmission ended, Vextar turned to his fleet coordinator. "Signal all hegemony vessels. Operation Correction begins immediately. I want every ship in the Grand Fleet assembled within 72 hours. The next 3 days saw the greatest military mobilization in recent galactic history. From across the hegemony's territories, warships converged on the staging area near the edge of human space. The Dominion's Edge served as the flagship for a force of 300 vessels, ranging from fast attack cruisers to massive dreadnoughts capable of destroying entire moons. Each ship carried weapons that could crack planets. Their shields could deflect the energy of small stars. Their crews were veterans of a dozen successful campaigns against rebellious species. This was not just a fleet. It was the instrument of galactic law itself. On the bridge of his flagship, Vextar watched the final ships arrive. The assembled fleet stretched across space like a metallic constellation. No force in known history had been able to stand against such overwhelming power. "Sir," his navigation officer reported, "all ships ready for jump to human space. Estimated arrival at target coordinates in 6 hours." "Excellent. Begin the operation." Space twisted and folded as 300 ships engaged their faster-than-light drives simultaneously. The Grand Fleet vanished from the staging area and reappeared at the edge of the Kepler sector. What they found there changed everything. Human ships were fleeing in apparent panic. Civilian transports loaded with colonists raced away from the outer settlements. Mining platforms were being hastily abandoned. The humans seemed to have detected the fleet's approach and were running in terror. "Excellent," Vextar said with satisfaction. "They know they cannot fight us. Perhaps this will end without unnecessary bloodshed." But his intelligence officer was studying the sensor readings with confusion. "Sir, something is wrong. The human evacuation patterns do not make tactical sense. They are not fleeing toward their core territories. They are moving in seemingly random directions." "Fear makes beings act irrationally," Vextar replied. "Deploy the fleet across all 3 systems. Establish occupation zones around the abandoned facilities. Prepare broadcast systems for surrender negotiations." The Grand Fleet spread out like a vast net, claiming control of human space. Vextar prepared to address the fleeing humans, to offer them terms for peaceful surrender. The message would be simple: accept Council authority or face the consequences. He never got the chance to send it. "Sir," his sensor operator called out, scales bright white with shock. "Massive energy signature detected. Something is approaching from the direction of Seoul. Power output is..." "Sir, the readings cannot be correct. The signature rivals a small star." Vextar's command chair swiveled toward the main display. At the edge of sensor range, something was indeed approaching. Something enormous. Something that radiated energy levels that made his most powerful dreadnoughts look like children's toys. "Analysis," he ordered tersely. "Unknown vessel, sir. Length approximately 40 kilometers. Mass equals a small moon. Energy output suggests they have a controlled stellar core aboard." "Sir, no known technology should be able to contain that much power in a mobile platform." Around the bridge, crew members stared at their instruments in disbelief. Several began running diagnostic checks, convinced their equipment was malfunctioning. Vextar felt something he had not experienced in decades: uncertainty. The humans had been in space for only 2 centuries. Their technology was primitive, their ships slow and clumsy. They could not possibly have built something that defied the laws of physics as understood by galactic civilization. "Sir," his communications officer announced. "We are receiving a transmission from the approaching vessel. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was calm, professional, and utterly terrifying in its confidence. "Hegemony forces, this is Admiral Marcus Rodriguez of the Terran Defense Force. You have entered human space without authorization and have threatened civilian populations. You have exactly 1 hour to withdraw beyond the boundary markers we transmitted to your government 6 months ago. This is your only warning." Vextar's scales cycled through several colors before settling on furious red. "Human vessel, you are speaking to Commander Vextar of the Hegemony Coalition Grand Fleet. We do not take orders from primitive species. Surrender immediately or face destruction." The response came back immediately. "Commander, you misunderstand the situation. We are not giving you orders. We are explaining the consequences of your choices. You have 59 minutes to begin withdrawal." As the transmission ended, Vextar stared at the growing energy signature on his displays. Whatever was approaching, it was like nothing in his experience. The power readings continued to climb beyond anything his instruments could properly measure. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Vextar began to wonder if the hegemony had made a terrible mistake. The hour passed like a held breath. Across the 3 star systems, the Hegemony Grand Fleet held position while their sensors tracked the approaching monster. Every minute brought new readings that challenged everything they thought they knew about physics and engineering. Commander Vextar stood rigid on his bridge, watching displays that showed an impossible reality. The human vessel had not slowed as it approached. If anything, it was accelerating. Something that massive should not be able to move so fast. The energy required would be astronomical. "Sir," his sensor operator reported, scales pale with stress. "The human vessel will reach visual range in 10 minutes. Preliminary analysis suggests the structure is not a traditional ship design. It appears to be a hollowed-out asteroid, heavily modified and armored." "An asteroid?" Vextar's scales flashed confused orange. "They turned a space rock into a warship?" "Yes, sir."
"We are detecting multiple layers of armor plating, thousands of weapon emplacements, and what appears to be a controlled black hole at the center of the structure." The bridge fell silent.
A controlled black hole was theoretical technology, even for the most advanced species. The power requirements alone should have been impossible for a species barely 2 centuries into space travel. "Sir," the communications officer announced, "Admiral Rodriguez is transmitting again. Put him through." The same calm voice filled the bridge. "Commander Vextar, your hour has expired. We note that your fleet has not begun withdrawal procedures. We are therefore implementing defensive protocols. For the record, Earth offered you peaceful coexistence. You chose war." Vextar's scales turned deep purple. "Admiral Rodriguez, you pilot 1 ship against 300. Your confidence is admirable but misplaced. Surrender now and your crew will be treated according to galactic conventions." "Commander, I think you still do not understand what you are facing. We are not surrendering. We are not retreating. We are not negotiating. Your fleet has threatened human civilians." That ends now, the transmission cut off. On the main display, the human vessel finally came into visual range, and what the Hegemony crew saw made them question their sanity. The ship was a mountain. 40 kilometers of scarred rock and metal, bristling with weapon systems like the spines of some nightmare creature. The original asteroid had been completely hollowed out and rebuilt from the inside. Massive fusion drives pushed the structure forward at speeds that should have torn it apart. Energy crackling across its hull suggested shield systems operating at power levels that defied comprehension. But it was the weapons that truly terrified the watching aliens. Thousands of railgun batteries lined the hull. Missile ports opened like hungry mouths. Energy cannons charged with the light of captive stars. This was not just a warship. This was an instrument of total destruction. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, "I am reading over 10,000 individual weapon systems. The armor appears to be some kind of layered composite designed to dissipate energy attacks. And, sir, the mass drivers appear to be loaded with relativistic projectiles." Vextar felt his confidence cracking like ice in spring. Relativistic projectiles meant the humans could fire objects at significant fractions of light speed. At those velocities, even a small piece of metal could punch through any known shield system. "All ships," he ordered, "prepare for combat. Target the human vessel with everything we have. Fire on my mark." Across the Grand Fleet, 300 warships charged their weapons. Quantum disruptors powered up. reality warping cannons prepared to unleash forces that could tear holes in space itself. Energy beams capable of vaporizing moons focused on the approaching human ship. Fire. The combined firepower of the Grand Fleet lanced out across space in a display that would have been visible from neighboring star systems. Enough concentrated energy to destroy a small planet struck the human vessel simultaneously. The beams hit the ship's hull and simply disappeared. Energy dissipation systems scattered the attacks harmlessly into space. Quantum disruptors, designed to unmake matter at the molecular level, failed to penetrate armor composed of materials that should not have existed. The human ship did not even slow down. Impossible, Vextar breathed. His scales had turned white with shock. Nothing can withstand that level of concentrated fire. Sir, his tactical officer reported, voice cracking with stress. The human vessel is returning fire. The first railgun salvo was almost beautiful in its simplicity. Solid projectiles accelerated to 20% of light speed, crossed the distance between fleets in seconds. Each projectile carried the kinetic energy of a nuclear weapon. The humans fired them in precise patterns, targeting the largest hegemony vessels first. The Valor's Edge, a dreadnought that had served for 800 years, took 3 hits simultaneously. The projectiles punched through its shields as if they were soap bubbles, tore through its armor like paper, and emerged from the far side carrying debris and atmosphere. The massive ship broke apart in expanding clouds of wreckage. Evasive maneuvers, Vextar shouted. All ships scatter formation. But the human ship was not done. Fusion missiles began launching from its hull in steady streams. Each warhead contained enough explosive power to crack a moon. They spread across space like deadly flowers, seeking targets with predatory intelligence. The first wave of missiles reached the hegemony fleet 30 seconds later. Ships that had ruled space for millennia vanished in nuclear fireballs. Those that survived the initial strikes found their shields failing as secondary explosions tore through their formations. And still the human ship kept coming. Sir, his helmsman called out, the human vessel is not slowing down. It appears to be using its mass as a weapon. Vextar realized with growing horror what the humans intended. The ship was not just firing at them. It was charging directly into their formation, using its enormous mass and speed as the ultimate kinetic weapon. All ships, he broadcast frantically. Clear the main axis of approach. Do not let that thing reach close quarters, but it was too late. The human ship plowed into the center of the Grand Fleet like a battering ram through paper walls. Hegemony vessels tried to scatter, but the monster's point defense systems tracked them with inhuman precision. Smaller ships simply disintegrated under the combined firepower. Larger vessels found themselves caught in gravitational fields generated by the ship's controlled black hole. The Dominion's Edge managed to avoid the main assault, but Vextar watched in horror as half his fleet was destroyed in the first 10 minutes of battle. Ships that had never known defeat were being swatted aside like insects. Sir, his science officer reported, I am detecting massive power buildups across the human vessel. They appear to be charging some kind of primary weapon system. On the main display, the human ship's central axis began to glow with contained energy. Whatever they were preparing to fire, it would make their previous attacks look like gentle persuasion. All remaining ships, Vextar ordered desperately. Concentrate fire on that central weapon. Stop them from charging it. The surviving hegemony vessels focused their remaining firepower on the human ship's center section. Energy beams, particle cannons, and quantum disruptors all struck the same target area. For a moment, it seemed like they might be causing damage. Then the human ship fired. The beam that erupted from its central axis was not just a weapon. It was a piece of stellar core contained and directed by technology that the hegemony could not comprehend. The energy beam cut through space like a blade through silk, striking the heavy cruiser Infinite Justice dead center. The ship did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. Matter and energy converted to plasma in the space of a heartbeat. When the beam faded, there was nothing left but expanding gases and the echo of screams across the comm channels. Vextar's scales had turned completely white. Around him, his bridge crew stared in shock at displays showing the destruction of their supposedly invincible fleet. In less than an hour, the humans had demonstrated weapons and tactics that made galactic civilization's finest warships look like primitive toys. Sir, his communications officer said quietly, Admiral Rodriguez is transmitting again. Vextar almost did not want to hear what the human had to say, but duty compelled him to listen. Commander Vextar, the calm voice said, "You now understand what you are facing. This is the TDF retribution, and it represents humanity's response to your threats against our civilians. You have a choice. Order your remaining ships to withdraw immediately, or we will demonstrate why this vessel is named after vengeance itself." Looking at his tactical displays, seeing the wreckage of what had been the galaxy's most powerful fleet, Vextar finally understood the terrible truth. Humanity had not been hiding from galactic civilization because they were weak. They had been preparing for war. Commander Vextar stared at the tactical display showing the scattered remains of his once mighty fleet. Half his ships were gone, reduced to expanding clouds of debris and radiation. The survivors huddled at maximum range, their crews in shock at witnessing the impossible. The human ship hung in space like a mechanical god of war, its weapons still glowing with residual energy. "Sir," his communications officer whispered, "what are your orders?" Vextar's scales cycled through colors rapidly, reflecting his inner turmoil. Retreat would mean admitting defeat to a species the galaxy considered primitive. But continuing the fight might mean the complete destruction of the Grand Fleet. He had never faced such a decision in 3 decades of military service. "Open a channel to the human vessel," he finally ordered Admiral Rodriguez's voice filled the bridge immediately, as if he had been waiting for the call. "Commander Vextar, I hope you are prepared to see reason." "Admiral," Vextar began, his voice strained, "your vessel is impressive, but you are still one ship against my remaining forces. Surely we can find a peaceful solution to this situation." "Commander, you misunderstand our position. The retribution is not alone." As if summoned by his words, space around the human ship began to shimmer. Cloaking fields deactivated, revealing dozens of smaller human vessels that had been hidden in the area. Each ship was sleek and angular, designed for speed and stealth rather than brute force. But their weapon signatures showed they were anything but defenseless. "Sir," Vextar's sensor operator reported with growing panic, "I am detecting 43 additional human vessels. They appear to be equipped with some kind of advanced cloaking technology." Vextar felt his remaining confidence drain away like water through broken stone. The humans had not sent one ship to face his fleet. They had prepared a trap and he had walked directly into it. "Admiral Rodriguez," he said carefully, "what are your terms for our withdrawal?" "Complete evacuation of all 3 star systems within 12 hours. No hegemony vessel to approach within 50 light-years of human space without explicit permission. Formal recognition of human territorial claims by the Galactic Council and Commander." Rodriguez's voice carried a note of cold steel. "You personally will return to your government with a message. Tell them that Earth tried diplomacy. Tell them what happened when you forced us to use other methods." Before Vextar could respond, his tactical officer screamed out a warning. "Sir!" Multiple boarding pods launching from the human stealth ships. They are attempting to board our vessels. Across the fleet, hegemony ships found themselves under assault by small, fast-moving craft that attached themselves to hull sections like mechanical parasites. These boarding pods carried human soldiers who began cutting their way through armor plating with weapons that seemed to burn through even the strongest materials. "All ships," Vextar broadcast, "repel boarders. Activate internal defense systems." The first human soldiers to breach the hull of the cruiser Stellar Might found themselves facing automated defense turrets and energy barriers designed to stop any known species. But the humans had studied hegemony technology for decades. They wore armor that deflected energy weapons and carried devices that disrupted the ship's computer systems. More disturbing than their equipment was their behavior. Hegemony soldiers were trained to fight according to civilized rules of engagement. They used non-lethal weapons when possible, avoided damage to critical ship systems, and always offered surrender terms to defeated enemies. The humans fought like creatures possessed. They moved through the ship's corridors with terrifying efficiency, using explosive charges to clear obstacles and showing no mercy to defenders. They targeted life support systems, computer cores, and weapon control centers with the precision of beings who had studied their enemies' weaknesses for years. Within minutes, the Stellar Might went dark as its main power systems were sabotaged. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as human soldiers systematically disabled everything that made the ship functional. "Sir," the ship's captain transmitted desperately, "the humans are not trying to capture the vessel. They are destroying it from the inside. They are making it impossible for us to fight or retreat." Similar reports came in from 6 other hegemony ships. The human boarding parties were small but incredibly effective. They seemed to know exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. Vextar made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. All ships with human boarders aboard ram the enemy vessel. If we cannot save those ships, we will at least make the humans pay for their aggression. 7 hegemony cruisers turned toward the massive human ship and engaged their engines at maximum power. Their crews, knowing they were flying to their deaths, sang ancient war songs as they prepared for final combat. The Retribution responded with calm precision. Point defense systems that had been invisible during the first engagement now revealed themselves. Thousands of small weapons tracked the approaching ships with mechanical efficiency. Energy pulses and kinetic interceptors reached out to meet the charging vessels. The first cruiser, Honor's Blade, made it within 5 kilometers before concentrated fire overwhelmed its shields and tore the ship apart. The second and third ships met similar fates, their final charges ending in expanding fireballs that briefly lit up the surrounding space. But the remaining 4 ships pressed on, their crews accepting death as the price of damaging their tormentor. The Stellar Might, her systems crippled by human sabotage, managed to reach the enemy ship's hull before her fusion reactor detonated in a blast that would have vaporized a small moon. When the explosion cleared, Vextar expected to see massive damage to the human vessel. Instead, he watched in horror as automated repair systems began sealing the relatively minor breaches caused by the impact. The Retribution had been scarred but not seriously damaged. Impressive dedication, Admiral Rodriguez's voice cut through the comm channels. Commander Vextar, your crews fought bravely, but as you can see, we were prepared for ramming attacks. Our armor is designed to withstand kinetic impacts up to and including small asteroids. Vextar realized with growing despair that the humans had planned for everything. They had studied hegemony tactics, anticipated their responses, and built countermeasures for every possible attack. This was not a battle between equals. This was a demonstration of superior preparation meeting overconfident tradition. Sir, his science officer reported quietly, long-range sensors are detecting additional energy signatures approaching from the outer system. Analysis suggests more human vessels inbound. The tactical display updated to show new contacts moving toward their position. These ships were different from the Retribution and its escorts. They appeared to be pure warships built for speed and firepower, rather than the massive intimidation factor of the converted asteroid. How many? Vextar asked, though he dreaded the answer. 12 vessels, sir, each approximately the size of our heavy cruisers. Power signatures suggest they are armed with similar weapons to the main ship. Vextar's remaining scales finally settled on the deep blue of complete defeat. His grand fleet, the pride of the hegemony coalition, had been reduced to less than 100 functional ships. The humans had revealed capabilities that made a mockery of everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Open a channel to Admiral Rodriguez, he ordered, his voice heavy with resignation. Yes, Commander? Admiral, I formally request terms for the surrender of my remaining forces. There was a pause before Rodriguez responded, and when he did, his voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. Commander, you fought with honor according to your traditions, but those traditions are no longer sufficient for this galaxy. Your ships and crews will be allowed to withdraw unharmed, but you will carry a message to your government and to the Galactic Council. What message, Admiral? Tell them that Earth offered peace. Tell them what happened when they chose war instead. And tell them that the Retribution was only the beginning. Humanity has been preparing for this day for 50 years. We have built a fleet that makes your grand fleet look like patrol boats. If the galaxy wants war with humanity, they will get more war than they can possibly imagine. As Vextar's surviving ships began their withdrawal, he could not shake the image of the human vessel hanging in space like a monument to destruction. The hegemony had ruled through superior technology and overwhelming force for 3,000 years. Today, they had learned there was something more dangerous than either. A species that refused to accept limitations and had spent decades preparing for the day when diplomacy would fail. The age of galactic civilization's dominance was ending. The age of humanity had begun. The crystal halls of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Representatives from 47 species sat in stunned silence, their various forms of communication reduced to anxious whispers and nervous energy fluctuations. The holographic displays around them showed the aftermath of what military historians would later call The Battle of Kepler's End. Commander Vextar stood at the center of the chamber, his scales a dull gray that indicated profound shame among his people. His report had been brief and devastating. The Grand Fleet was gone. 300 ships reduced to fewer than 80 damaged survivors. The humans had not just won a battle. They had demonstrated that everything the galaxy believed about warfare was obsolete. Elder HFY's crystal form showed visible fractures, stress patterns that indicated thoughts too chaotic for his species' normally perfect mental discipline. Commander Vextar, you are certain of these capabilities you describe? Elder, I watched a 40-kilometer warship built from a hollowed asteroid move at speeds that should have torn it apart. I saw weapons that made our most advanced systems look like children's toys. The humans did not just defeat us. They played with us. A ripple of distress moved through the assembly. The Benthos delegation's water chambers bubbled frantically as their occupants discussed the implications in rapid clicks and whistles. The energy beings known as the Lumina pulsed with colors that indicated deep fear. "One ship," muttered the representative from the Hive Queens, her insectoid form clicking with agitation. "One ship destroyed the greatest fleet in galactic history." "Not one ship," Vextar corrected grimly. "They revealed dozens of escort vessels using cloaking technology we cannot detect. And according to their Admiral Rodriguez, this fleet was only the beginning. They claim to have built an entire battle group using similar technology." The chamber erupted in chaotic discussion. Several species demanded immediate military action. Others called for diplomatic contact. A few suggested retreating to distant sectors of the galaxy and hoping humanity would ignore them. The debate was interrupted by an announcement from the chamber's communication systems. "Honored representatives, the human ambassador requests immediate audience." Every sensor and consciousness in the chamber focused on the entrance as Dr. Sarah Chen walked in. She looked exactly the same as she had 6 months earlier, tired, middle-aged, wearing a simple uniform. But now her presence seemed to fill the enormous space. The beings who had once barely acknowledged her existence watched her every movement, with the attention normally reserved for natural disasters. Chen walked to the human section and sat down at her small table. She placed a datapad in front of her and looked around the chamber with calm eyes. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the silence. "I have come to discuss the new reality of galactic civilization." Elder HFY's crystal voice rang with desperate authority. "Dr. Chen, this council demands that humanity explain its unprovoked aggression against hegemony forces." Chen's expression did not change. "Elder HFY, there was nothing unprovoked about our response. You issued an ultimatum demanding that humanity submit to restrictions we never agreed to. When we declined, you sent a military fleet to enforce your will. We defended ourselves. You destroyed 300 ships." The representative from the Void Walkers projected thoughts filled with outrage. "We defended ourselves," Chen repeated calmly. "The fact that your fleet was inadequate for the task is not our responsibility." Commander Vextar stepped forward, his scales showing deep purple resignation. "Dr. Chen, what does humanity want from this council?" Chen touched her datapad, and the chamber's holographic systems activated. New images appeared showing the current state of human space. The red dots that had once marked scattered settlements now formed a solid block of territory spanning dozens of star systems. "Commander, humanity wants what every species wants: room to grow, resources to sustain our population, and the right to exist without interference. We have claimed 37 star systems as human territory. This claim is non-negotiable." The chamber erupted again. The Benthos representative's translator struggled to keep up with rapid protests. "Impossible. Those systems contain protected worlds, ancient artifacts, sacred sites." Chen waited for the noise to die down before responding. "We have identified 12 worlds in those systems that appear to have archaeological or cultural significance to other species. We are prepared to negotiate access rights and preservation agreements, but the systems themselves are now under human control. You cannot simply claim entire star systems." Elder HFY's fractures deepened as stress overwhelmed his mental discipline. "We can," Chen replied simply. "We have, and we have the military force to defend those claims against anyone who disagrees." The truth of her words hung in the air like a physical presence. Every being in the chamber had seen the reports from Kepler's End. They knew what human military force meant now. "Dr. Chen," Vextar said quietly. What of species that cannot accept these new realities? Chen's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. Commander, that depends on how they express their disagreement. Species that choose to avoid human space will be left alone. Species that attempt trade or diplomacy will be welcomed. Species that threaten human civilians or territory will be dealt with accordingly. You are describing conquest, the Hive Queen representative clicked accusingly. I am describing self-defense, Chen corrected. For 2 centuries, humanity has tried to coexist peacefully with galactic civilization. We were ignored, dismissed, and finally threatened with extinction. We prepared for the day when peaceful coexistence would no longer be an option. Chen touched her data pad again. New images appeared showing massive construction projects in human space. Orbital shipyards that dwarfed anything the galaxy had seen before. Industrial complexes that could process entire asteroids. And in the center of it all, more ships like the Retribution taking shape. These are our new construction facilities, Chen explained. As we speak, 12 more vessels similar to the Retribution are nearing completion. Each one incorporates improvements based on lessons learned from the recent battle. Each one is more powerful than the ship that destroyed your grand fleet. The silence that followed was broken only by the subtle sounds of life support systems and quantum processors. Several representatives seemed to be having difficulty with their translation equipment, as if their minds were rejecting what they were hearing. Elder HFY finally found his voice. Dr. Chen, what you describe would make humanity the dominant military power in the galaxy. Yes, Chen agreed. It would. That is unacceptable, the Voidwalker representative projected. No single species can be allowed such power. Chen stood slowly, and somehow her small human form seemed to tower over the massive alien beings around her. Representative, you misunderstand the situation. We are not asking for your permission. We are informing you of facts. She gathered her materials and prepared to leave. Humanity spent 2 centuries as the ignored newcomers to galactic civilization. We asked for recognition and received condescension. We requested trade agreements and were offered scraps. We sought diplomatic solutions and were given ultimatums. As she walked toward the exit, Chen's voice carried across the chamber with absolute finality. Those days are over. Humanity is no longer asking for our place in the galaxy. We are taking it. The only choice you have is whether you want that transition to be peaceful or otherwise. The chamber doors closed behind her, leaving the assembled representatives in shock. For long minutes, no one spoke. The implications of what they had heard were too vast to process quickly. Finally, Elder HFY's fractured voice broke the silence. What have we done? Commander Vextar answered with the bitter wisdom of defeat. We made the mistake of threatening a species that fights to win, rather than fighting to demonstrate superiority. We assumed that because humans seemed weak, they would remain weak. We never considered that they might be using that perceived weakness to prepare for a war we forced them to fight. Across the galaxy, the news spread like ripples in a cosmic pond. Humanity had emerged from the shadows of galactic civilization, not as supplicants but as conquerors. Species that had ruled space for millennia suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders, wondering if human ships were watching from the darkness between stars. Some species immediately began preparing tribute offerings. Others withdrew to distant regions, hoping to avoid notice. A few proud races spoke of resistance and revenge, not understanding that they were describing their own extinction. In human space, Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Retribution and watched the construction of its sister ships. Each new vessel was larger, more powerful, and more terrifying than the last. The Retribution had been built to prove a point. The ships now taking shape were built for conquest. Admiral, his communications officer reported, we are receiving surrender offers from 17 different species, trade requests from 32 others. And sir, 3 species are demanding an audience to discuss alliance terms. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Send standard responses to the trade requests. Schedule alliance discussions for next month. As for the surrender offers,